Welcome to Faith in 5, a weekly video devotional designed to discuss practical spiritual concepts in 5 minutes or less. I'm your host, Mark Vandella. Recently, I sat on my friend's front porch on a buggy and muggy Michigan summer evening. My friends Blaine and Christy and I have been doing church together for a long time. We used to lead student ministries together, and our recent church just closed. And so we were talking about, what do we want out of a church? Like, if we could start from scratch, what things would we include and what things would we exclude? And we kind of got to the spot where we agreed that we needed to be a place where people could grow in their faith. They could live faith together. But we also needed to be a place where people who had no faith were comfortable, were welcome, and could grow in their faith without threat of being converted, so to speak. It just needed to be comfortable. And that was the must. Those were the two things that we needed to have. And as I drove home that night, I thought, man, why do these things, in my life, in my ministry, I've always thought of these two things as separate but necessary. And I was reflecting on Andy Stanley's book, Deep and Wide, where Andy talks about these two concepts and that they're necessary for having a good church. But as I said, as I drove home, I was just struck that why in my life have I always seen them as separate entities? So Andy describes that the deep side is for Christ followers, for people that wanted to learn more, wanted to study more, and know more about God. And the wide side is really being able to reach people that don't already have a faith, or people who are on the edge of faith. And so you have to have both. But as I lived out my faith and as I watch other Christians live out their faith, I think that we often see them as two separate entities on either side of a scale. And so as we grow deeper, as we spend more time reading the Bible, and as we spend more time studying the Old Testament and all the Gospels and all that, we slowly have little room for people that don't know Jesus. And then if we start putting effort here and we start having concerts or welcome events or whatever it is that or maybe we simplify the message, then we have people that say, hey, this just isn't deep enough. It just doesn't have enough meat for me. And so if you've ever found yourself on either side of that or trying to balance these scales, I want to argue today that maybe our faith isn't functioning in this way, or it shouldn't function in this way. It shouldn't be on two separate ends of the spectrum. What if they worked together? What if the two things were, as we go wide, as we interact with people who are not like us, what if that is an act of faith and an act of growing deeper with our God and growing closer with our God? In his book, Andy Stanley actually says that faith, what he determined, faith is actually a measurement of our faith. I know it sounds really odd, but basically he's saying that our faith, the measure of our deepness, our closeness with God, is measured by how much we trust, how much confidence we have in God. And so what if we grow deeper with God, we trust him more and have more confidence, the more we interact with other people? See, sometimes I think that we like to read devotionals and study the book of Mark for the 20th time. But what if whenever I've done that, it hasn't necessarily made me feel like I'm growing closer to God, that it's increasing my faith in God by doing that? It's more information, but not necessarily more experience in this world. And so, in the Great Commission, the Bible says in Matthew 29:19 through 20, it says, go and make disciples of all the nations. It says go, right? That's the wide side. And then baptize them and teach them all the things that I have shown you. And that's kind of the deep side. But what if our faith grows the more we interact with people who are not like us? The more we interact with people who don't know God? In my 16 years of ministry, that's been the case for me. Anytime I walked into a conversation with a couple who was at odds, who was ready to call it quits, my faith was challenged. And I had to trust God more than I had before. Anytime I sat down with a friend who was struggling with an addiction, all of a sudden my experience didn't match his. And my worldview started to shift a bit to say, God, where are you here? And how do I trust you more? Or even as simple as sitting down with a high school student talking about his parents' divorce. Those are the times that caused me to go back to my God and ask him what's going on here. Pray more earnestly, read the Bible more earnestly to try to figure out what was going on. Those were the times that I grew deeper in my faith. Andy Stanley says that it's not our job to fill up anybody's cup, but it's our responsibility to empty ours. So I would argue if you're looking to go deeper with your faith, instead of reading the same book of the Bible again or trying to find a deeper study, I would argue get out there and spend more time with people who don't know God. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to follow us each week, click here to subscribe. And if you want to take it a little bit further, click here for discussion materials.